Hello and welcome into another edition of the JMac podcast. So glad that you are here with us as we are getting closer and closer to election day. And of course, we're all wondering what's going to happen on that day. Will we know who the winner is by the end of the day? Will the loser bow out gracefully? Will this be tied up in the courts for weeks or even months? Will somebody be escorted by the military out of the White House? So many questions. Will there be protests in the streets? I mean, will there be riots in the streets? All of these things, unfortunately, in 2020 are a distinct possibility. But what I wanted to talk to you about was polling. In fact, I wanted to ask you this question. Do you think the presidential polls are a bunch of hocus pocus? Now, I know a lot of you are going to instantly say yes. And the reason you're going to say yes is because of 2016, because the polling was so terribly wrong in 2016. Well, I have a theory about that I wanted to share with you. I've covered presidential elections in newsrooms for the last 20 years. And so I've watched how returns come in. I've watched how counties like Broward County in Florida come in. And I saw something very interesting on the election night of 2016. And I've shared this philosophy with some people before. You might have heard me say it. I would love your feedback on it. Please leave it in the comments. But here we are again. Now we're in 2020. The polling was so terribly wrong in 2016. A lot of the polling, not all of it. The national polling was pretty accurate that Hillary Clinton would win the popular vote. But, you know, we come here to 2020 and everybody's going, oh, we don't believe those. And part of that will play into some of the hysteria that may occur if the president loses. And so the question is the polling accurate? Can you count on what you're seeing right now? Well, the first thing I will tell you is I've had my own experience with polling this year. As most of you know, I ran for Congress in the 4th District. And one of the reasons why I ran is because the polling that we did before I entered the race and the polling that we did throughout the race showed that I had a considerable lead. It was still within the margin of error, but it was significant over my opponents. And so, for example, there came a point in the campaign when we were going to spend a lot of money for getting out the signatures. And we looked at the polling and we said, is this worth it? Because I said, I don't want to spend a lot of people's money to get on the ballot if we don't have a legitimate chance of getting on the ballot. And so we looked at the polling and it showed that we had that significant lead that we had felt that we had from the very beginning. And we pressed forward. And at every turn, we looked at the polling and we pressed forward. So then here comes the very last poll, and things had tightened up considerably. And then on the election night, on primary night, as many of you know, I was blown out of the water by Burgess Owens. And so I looked back at all that polling, and I'm like, what in the world happened? If we thought that this would be such a significant disparity, I probably would have dropped out much sooner and would have made decisions differently. Now, those people who are in the know and who do this on a regular basis have told me that the primary difference was that Burgess Owens had the funds to spend for commercial advertising, television advertising in the end, and I didn't. And so you saw him on TV, you didn't see me, and they say that was the difference. I don't really know. I think that I was running a very different campaign than a lot of people wanted. I was trying to run more as a moderate. I was trying to bring civility back into the Republican Party. And I just think, for the most part, people wanted somebody who was going to support Trump, who was going to attack the left and continue down the road that we're on. So I offered an alternative, and a lot of people have thanked me for giving them that alternative. But I think for the most part, running in a Republican primary in District 4, people chose the candidate that they wanted, and that was not me, and I've totally come to terms with that. So why ever it happened, it happened. But why did the polling happen that way? Well, I can tell you in the state of Utah that they had a really hard time every time they did a poll getting a big enough sample to be able to really have accurate polling. They couldn't get people to pick up the phone. They couldn't get enough of people on both sides of the aisle and in the center. So what they published, I'll be honest, I don't even know if they should have published it because the sample size was so small. So that was possibly misleading. But that's my own experience with the polling. So I want to get to my philosophy about what happened with the polls. But I wanted to share with you, this is from somebody who you might call fake news, but this is their interpretation of the polling where it stands and why polling this year is different than back in 2016.
Foley Van Lieshout, a law student in Wisconsin, is still haunted by 2016 and her decision not to vote.
When I looked online, it said that Hillary Clinton was polling at 98% likely to win. And I thought, okay, it doesn't really matter if I do this or not, because I can trust the polls. God, was that a mistake?
The biggest stunner then, the state polls that showed Clinton ahead in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But the Democrats' blue wall crumbled, Donald Trump narrowly winning all three, and with them, the White House. That disconnect has fueled doubts about today's polls that show Joe Biden with a comfortable advantage.
They're fake polls. They're fake.
I never take anything for granted.
There are significant differences between then and now. Biden's lead has been stable. Clinton's was up and down. And this year there are half as many undecided voters who could break either way at the last minute. Still, pollsters have made changes so they do not underestimate Trump's support, including calling enough white voters without college degrees and rural voters.
What's helping this time also is that the huge early vote, those are already voters in the bank. So we're dealing with less of a population to begin with, which creates a more precise estimate in the end.
This time, Foley's not taking chances.
I'm very happy to tell you that I've already voted.
Because the only poll that matters is the one on Election Day. Peter Alexander, NBC News, Washington.
So let me break down some of the things that they said were different. And I've looked at it, and they're actually saying that their polling techniques are better, that they're polling a better sample, and that they don't have to poll as many people right now because so many people have already voted. So they're just weeding those people out. But let me tell you my experience covering the 2016 election from the KSL newsroom. And again, I've covered presidential elections and local elections for 20 years. Here's what normally happens on the night of a presidential election. Usually, early in the day, the Republican is ahead. And there's a reason for that. It's because the smaller counties report first. So, as you know, the more dense a population is, the more blue it becomes, the more left it leans. You look at every major city across the country and you look in the downtown area, you're probably going to find blue. Like the state of Nevada. Most of Nevada is completely red, but you get down to Las Vegas and it's blue. And there's enough blue there to counteract the rest of the state depending on the election. So what happens is those smaller counties, they finish their counting very quickly and they report very quickly. So you can't trust the early numbers. And that's something I will tell you on this November 3rd. Disregard the early numbers. Don't freak out about them. Don't panic about them. The larger counties, in fact, the largest counties in the country, they come in late. And so there have been times, and I saw this with President Obama, where you will see what feels like the conservatives winning, the red winning, and then later on in the evening, suddenly you get Miami-Dade. Suddenly you get Detroit. Suddenly you get these major metropolitan areas that are blue. And what will happen is that blue overcomes the red later on in the evening. And that's when Florida, the entire state, could go from being projected as red to blue because one county comes in and it throws it over the top. So as I will admit freely and openly that I predicted that Donald Trump was going to get trounced. And I believed the polling. And so if any of you listened to my show back then, I'm like, Hillary Clinton's going to be our next president. I wasn't happy about it because I wasn't happy with either candidate. I was holding my nose on both sides. I didn't want Hillary in and I didn't want Donald Trump in. And I was looking at the polls and I felt like Donald was going to get beat. Hillary Clinton had planned the entire thing. I mean, looking at the polling, she was going to be the next president. President Trump, from everything we hear from insiders, he felt he was going to lose and was surprised when he didn't. So here's what I think happened. And I'm the only person I've ever heard share this belief. So maybe that means I'm completely wrong. But you actually heard something about it in this report that I just played for you, and I'll play it again in a minute. I believe that in 2016, the polling affected the outcome. And I think polling can affect outcomes over time anyway. I've always believed that. In fact, I will tell you, I think that one of the things that tanked our economy even more was a presidential candidate, Barack Obama, out on the campaign trail talking about how bad it is. I think that made that worse. I think that made people tighten up their wallets and suck in. And so I think that made the economy worse. It's just me. I think that campaigns have a huge impact on the population and on our mentality and on our feelings. And we're seeing that now in this campaign more than ever. So in 2016, people saw that Hillary Clinton was ahead by 8 to 10 points. They all believed the polls. And what did that cause them to do? Did that cause them to rush out and to vote? No, my friends, that's not what happened. You see, the real numbers that you have to look at are not the polling for Hillary, but the polling for President Trump. And ask yourself the question, did he outperform the polling that he was receiving? Did he garnish all of this support that the polls weren't predicting? Everything that I've seen says no. He got what he was projected to get. The difference was that Hillary Clinton didn't get what she was projected to get. So people are always talking about, these silent Trump supporters. No, it wasn't about people who weren't saying they were going to vote for Trump. Here's what happened. When Broward County came through, when Miami-Dade County came through, the Democrats didn't show up. They didn't vote. And I believe they didn't vote because they felt that it was in the bag. And that's what decided the election. Now the question is that what's going to happen this time? Again, this is just my belief, my philosophy about what happened. But you heard it, this young woman, at the beginning of that news report I played for her. Listen to her words again.
Foley Van Lieshout, a law student in Wisconsin, is still haunted by 2016 and her decision not to vote.
When I looked online, it said that Hillary Clinton was polling at 98% likely to win. And I thought, okay, it doesn't really matter if I do this or not, because I can trust the polls. God, was that a mistake?
See, she was influenced by the polls. And I think people said, I'm not going to stand in line. I'm not going to do that. But a couple of things have changed since then. First of all, people know what happens when you don't vote. Second of all, millions and millions and millions of more people have been given the opportunity to vote by mail and to vote early. And we hear that they have done so in dramatic ways, in record ways. And so, you add that to the fact that President Trump has made no effort to appeal to the center. You watch, Biden is pushing towards the center. And this is a typical presidential campaign, is while you're in the primary, you lean towards your party And so he would lean left, and then you win the primary, and then you move to the center, and you move to the center. President Trump feels that he won with his base, and all he has to do is fire up his base, and he will win with his base. In fact, I saw a parody the other day all about that base, that President Trump is all about that base. Well, the truth is that the only reason he won with his base, or this is my opinion, so I won't say the truth, is that the Democrats didn't show because of the polling. Do you think they're going to make that mistake twice? I don't think they are. I don't think they are. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, like I did back in 2016. I said I would never do this again, but I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to predict a major resounding victory for Joe Biden, because I don't think that mistake happens twice. I think they've gotten better at polling. They've learned their lesson when it comes to this type of thing. And because the president has just focused on his base, and because he has so bungled COVID-19. If COVID had never happened, he's most likely the next president. But COVID did happen, and if you listen to my podcast about whether or not we had to choose between safety and a strong economy, you will hear me point out that there was a third option, and that President Trump refused to see that option, even though I believe it was presented to him. And if he had seen that option, he would now be the president over an economy that is recovering aggressively and a nation that did everything in its power to save lives. Both of those things were achievable. So I encourage you to listen to that podcast, and I would love your feedback on that. So that's my prediction. You can share yours with me. I'm actually toying with the idea of doing a Facebook Live in the evening on November 3rd and allowing you folks to chime in via live video, and we can just talk about what's going on. If you would like to have that happen, I'm now set up to where I can actually have you link into the program, and I can interview you on your phone or on your computer. And so I'd love to get your live feedback, not just your text comments when we do a Facebook Live. So if you're interested in that, please let me know in the comments. And please also, those updates in our technology are made possible by those of you who are already making donations to this podcast. I need your help to continue to improve and to bring this to you on a regular basis. So please scan that QR code or go to the description, the link in the description, make a one-time donation or a monthly donation to this podcast so that I can continue to bring you fearless honesty on a regular basis. With that, I've got more podcasts coming this week, and I really think we're probably going to do this live Facebook Live broadcast on election night. Let me know what you think about that.